All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is for TE405, Teaching English Language Arts to Diverse Learners. My name is Cassie Brownell, and I am one of the instructors of this course. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at the things that are outlined in blue, which are part of the English Language Arts lesson plan assignment. You'll note that the things in red are part of differentiated instruction assignment. And we'll be going over this timeline together in class, but we wanted to give you a little bit of a brief glance to let you know that we will be working on 2 projects concurrently throughout the rest of this semester. Particularly before we get to spring break, you're going to be doing a lot of planning for both of these activities. So we're going to be building in a lot of scaffolding to help you in the ways that we would hope that you would be helping your students as well. So again, today this video is going to be focused on English Language Arts lesson plans, and we're going to help to break it down and help you to locate some different resources that you can be using. So to kind of get us started, you'll first find this English Language Arts lesson plan and reflection assignment sheet will be found on D2L. And there's a brief overview that you'll be provided. What we're looking for in this is kind of building on some of those discussions we've had in weeks 4 and 5 of the course, where we've really been focused on discussion and dialogue that happens within a classroom and the teacher and students' interactions with one another, as well as a type of questioning that you can provide to support students in their understanding of a literary piece of text and develop higher level thinking skills. So we're helping you to see how you can help children understand, interpret, and appreciate a literary text. So taking a step back and kind of looking at this assignment in particular, we want to note some different things and some different dates. This project itself is broken down into 3 different phases. The first of this will be about the inquiry process. We'll be looking at this in week 6 and 7, following our introduction of this actually in week 5. So in week 6, we're going to ask you to bring in some key points and objectives, as well as some book selections and an assessment that we can workshop with our peers, because we know that teaching is a collaborative effort. In week 7, we'll ask you to bring in a lesson plan, and we'll workshop that within these collaborative PLC groups once again. And we'll ask you to also meet with your mentor teacher to get some feedback and make some revisions. And then finally, we'll ask you to submit that to us in week 7 for the Tuesday groups. That will be on February 19th. If you are in a Monday group, you will be having this happen the following week, right before spring break. In phase 2, we're going to be looking at you actually teaching and making an audio recording of that lesson. And then in phase 3, you're going to listen to that recording, and you'll be making some different notes about how exactly this event occurred, as well as some different things that you could interpret from that. And all of these different materials compiled together will be due to the instructors in week 11 of the course. So let's get started by looking at phase 1. And one of the things we want to do is we want to recognize that this is something that you're already doing. You're working on this with us already within the key points and the vision setting that we've been doing with our differentiated instruction. So what phase 1 is about is planning, and we want to always plan with the end in mind. So taking a closer look at it, we're going to start off by asking you to draft and revise some lesson plans. So where do we begin with that? Well, we need to consider some of the materials that we want to be using. And we're going to ask you to identify 3 possible selections of literary text to bring into class with you. And we ask you to please meet with your mentor teachers to kind of go through some of these different pieces, finding a piece that will provide for an interactive dialogue with the students and helping them to interpret and appreciate a different piece of literary text. Phase 1, part 2, will be about gathering some pre-assessment information for your planning. So again, through a conversation with your mentor teacher, as well as using your prior knowledge and experiences in this classroom, we want you to identify some of the needs of your students, as well as what the norms are for the discussions that they're already having, as well as some norms that you might need to develop for your own classroom discussion that you will be leading. In week 6, we're going to be asking you to be bringing in 3 literary text selections. We're flexible with this. If you want to be using a whole book, if you want to be using a portion of a book, or a short story, or a piece of poetry, you can bring in 3 different things, but we're going to ask you to bring those to class, having consulted the Common Core standards, and workshopping these with a peer to really find a text that is best suited for whatever it is that you're choosing as your lesson goal. And we would ask that your lesson goal would identify 1 reading strategy that you can help your students to develop. So to help you find a good fitting text, we're offering to you a list of different questions. And this resource can be found on D2L. It's broken down into 3 different parts. The first of this is about selecting an appropriate text and has examples of questions like what kind of text will you choose? Will it be narrative, expository, fiction, nonfiction, textbook, article, or perhaps a poem? Part 2 of this text selection worksheet makes you really consider the discussion task structure as well as your role in planning as an instructor. So do you want your students to discuss the text as a large group, in a small group, in triads, or in pairs? Finally, part 3 of this worksheet will ask you to consider some questions that you could ask or prompts that you could include, such as the sentence starters that we saw in Ms. Brewer's video in the virtual classroom that we visited. Things like, how could they analyze the author's meaning or intent, or do they agree or disagree with the author? Moving on from there, we're going to be asking you to develop some objectives. Now, you've already had a lot of practice with this in our classroom times when we've been workshopping these different objectives, both with Dr. DeSoto and those that we provided to you in your PLC groups. What we're going to be asking now is that we're kind of switching gears, and we're going to ask you to do some color coding, acknowledging that performance, which is similar to the knowledge and nouns that we've been talking about, conditions just simply when it's happening, and the criterion is more of those skills and those verbs that we've been identifying in our vision planning. We also want to make sure that all of the objectives that we're creating are both observable and measurable, and we want to note too that you're going to find lots of resources for writing objectives on D2L as well as those that we've provided to you through our class discussions. Again, we're flexible, however, so if you prefer to write these objectives in 3 separate sentences, we would just ask you to label the characteristics with that given color, and we're also willing to let you go ahead and use that vision setting template that was provided to you after that first video. So looking at the objective and the key points and breaking it down in that way, whatever it is that suits you as a teacher. As you start to develop the parts of your lesson plan, you're going to notice that we have 4 major parts outlined in the lesson. And we can think about a lot of this in terms of Ms. Brewer video that we viewed. The first of these is the pre-reading, which is the I do, you as a teacher. How are you going to set the norms? How do you build background knowledge of your students? We noted in that video by Ms. Brewer that she provided hand signals and talked about how the students would engage in the discussion. Then we want you to consider what does it look like during the reading, the we do, the things that you do with your students. Again, looking at the video with Ms. Brewer, we noted lots of different ways in which she was engaging her students in conversation and building on their knowledge. In the post-reading, which is the you do, sending the students out in this gradual release responsibility model, and allowing them to do some work on their own. We can bring them back then for a larger group discussion, and we want you to really think about those kinds of questions that you're going to provide to them. We also want you to think about a post-assessment. What kind of an artifact can you collect and gather from your students to ensure that they have gained knowledge in this way? We want you to go beyond thinking about did the students enjoy the lesson, but to really provide us with some hard evidence of some of their learning. And so we would remind you to go back and review some of the things with Dr. DeSoto and the different types of assessments that we created there, as well as those that you've been able to create within your PLC groups. One final part of the lesson plan that we're going to ask you to consider are the ways in which you can provide for academic or behavioral adaptations, as well as those for providing for students that have cultural or linguistic needs as well. So we have 9 types of curriculum adaptations, which we'll be reviewing with you in class. But typically what we're going to be seeing is probably some changes to participation or perhaps to input, the way that the students receive the information that you're giving in instruction, or perhaps to output in the way that the students are going to be responding to instruction or the things that they're going to be producing. Beyond that, level of support and quantity are other ways in which you can easily adjust your curriculum and adapt it to the needs of your students. One thing we do want to remember is that when we're working as beginning teachers, and as all teachers, we really must plan backwards and plan with at the daily lesson vision level. So we talked about using and understanding the objective, the key points, and then moving directly to our assessment before we move on to the instructional strategies that we'll be using. And that at the end of this, we need to also create our exemplar student response. So that kind of wraps things up with phase 1 in terms of planning with the end in mind. Now we want to move to phase 2, which is about teaching and recording. So in week 8, we're going to be asking you to teach and record. So the first thing you're going to do is be teaching this lesson that you've been able to work on and revise. We'll ask you to ask your mentor teacher to informally observe you, as well as help you to develop your lessons in a different way and provide you some feedback on that. We'll also ask you to create an audio recording of your lesson. If you need some assistance with equipment, we would encourage you to visit the TIE's office in Erickson. And finally, we're going to ask you to write immediately after your lesson. We want you to jot down your overall impressions in your dialogic journal of the things that were working and those that were not. finally, we're moving on to phase 3, which is about reflecting and revising. So taking a closer look at phase 3, there's 7 different steps to this reflection, the first of 3 which are going to be about documenting exactly what happened using the audio recording that you made. So talking about participation and turn taking within the classroom, as well as the roles of the student and teacher, referring back to those week 4 articles, and again looking at the questions and type of thinking that were encouraged in the discussion. For 4 through 7, we're going to be asking you to use those artifacts that you collected as evidence to interpret what it is that has happened. So explain your thinking to us using this evidence, and then we would ask you, did your students learn? And if so, what did they learn? Using, again, those artifacts to show us the evidence of their learning. Beyond that, we want you to reflect on your own learning from this process and developing some potential next steps and revisions if you were to teach this course again. Finally, we want to reflect on the resources that are provided for you on D2L. We have the vision setting template, discussion prompts, the Common Core standards, as well as many different Bloom's verbs. And beyond that, we're also providing you with a handout of glossary terms and some different reading strategies that you might want to build on. And there's many more available to you at D2L, and we hope that you do go online and explore some of those things to find the things that you need. So that's everything from us today, and we hope that you can refer back to this video and take a look at this, bringing with you to class this ELA assignment sheet so that we can review it in class, and please feel free to bring us any questions that you may have.